Imagine sitting in a finance office, right? You're signing a contract, and you are fully knowing that you're still going to be sending hundreds of dollars a month to a bank 7, maybe 8 years from now.
Which is an incredibly long time to be tied to one loan.
Right, exactly. You're committing to this massive monthly drain for a machine that, sits outside in the harsh weather. And
it depreciates every single day.
Every single day. It might even need like a catastrophic mechanical overhaul before you even own it free and clear. Welcome to Auto News Talk.
Glad to be here.
So, for generations, buying a new car followed a pretty standard playbook. You figured out a budget, you picked a brand you liked, you haggled a bit on the lot, and you drove home. But looking at the current landscape, it feels like the fundamental laws of automotive physics have just completely collapsed.
Yeah, they really have.
And the catalyst for all this chaos is the $50,000 threshold for a new vehicle. It's no longer just a sticker price. It is a psychological and, financial barrier that is entirely rewriting the rules of what you drive, how you pay for it, and exactly how long you are trapped in that vehicle.
It's a massive barrier. And, while the mainstream headlines are obsessively focused on that initial sticker shock, the real story, the underlying current we really need to examine is the extreme, almost unprecedented lengths that everyday consumers, dealerships, and even policymakers are going to adapt.
Right.
The market is reshaping itself in real time. And frankly, some of the financial solutions being engineered on the fly they're arguably much more dangerous than the high prices themselves.
So here is the terrain we are walking through for this segment. We're going to explore the incredibly surprising and sometimes just desperate ways buyers are dodging these astronomical prices. We'll look at the dangerous new normal taking over the auto financing world. And finally, we're going to examine the massive, heavily funded interventions happening to forcefully push electric vehicle adoption into the mainstream.
A lot to cover.
It is. But if we start by looking at how consumers are navigating a market where average prices hover relentlessly near that $50,000 mark, the initial data actually paints a picture that looks strangely calm. It almost looks healthy.
Well, yeah, healthy on paper.
Right, I noticed that. I was looking at the latest pricing numbers out of a Kelley Blue Book report, and the average transaction prices appear remarkably stable, sitting just a hair under $50,000. And the sales volume is genuinely robust. The data points to a 16.5 million annualized sales rate. Given the broader economic pressures everywhere else, that sounds like a booming, confident market.
It absolutely looks like a booming market until you lift the hood on those numbers. The stability of that $50,000 average price is a complete illusion.
An illusion.
Yeah. It is not that individual cars are holding their prices steady. It is that buyers are tactically downshifting in mass numbers.
Okay, let's unpack this because the underlying metrics in that KBB data are fascinating. The top 5 best-selling vehicle segments in the industry all saw price increases.
Every single one.
Right. We're talking mid-size SUVs, compacts, full-size pickups. Every single one of them got more expensive. Automakers are fiercely holding the line, keeping their overall incentives disciplined at roughly 7% of the transaction price. So if everything popular is getting more expensive and discounts are tight, the average price should be skyrocketing.
It should be, but buyers are fleeing the expensive segments entirely. They are abandoning the heavy-duty, high-trim lifestyle vehicles and flocking downward to entry-level options just to make the math work.
The disparity is wild. That same pricing report points out that subcompact SUV sales shot up over 23%, while expensive full-size pickups barely nudged up 2.5%.
It's a massive shift.
It reminds me exactly of the real estate market. When you get priced out of the 4-bedroom single-family home with the big yard, you don't just stop needing a place to live.
No, you settle for the 2-bedroom condo.
Exactly. Buyers are staring at a $70,000 pickup truck, realizing the monthly payment would rival their mortgage, and they're just driving off the lot in a compact crossover instead.
And the implication for the consumer mindset is really telling here. People are desperate to stay in the new car market. They want the security of that factory warranty, they want the pristine condition, and they are willing to radically compromise on size, capability, and prestige to get it.
Right.
They're literally squeezing their families into a smaller footprint to maintain the security of a new vehicle.
I see the logic, but I keep hitting a wall with this trend. How long can automakers maintain this pricing discipline before consumers simply run out of cheaper segments to downshift into?
That's the real problem.
Yeah, because you can only go so small before you physically cannot fit a family of 5 into the vehicle. What this data doesn't really answer is what happens when that limit is reached. At some point, the condo analogy breaks down because people just need more space.
And that is exactly where the bottom falls out. Downshifting into a subcompact only works for a specific portion of the market. For the buyers who absolutely need space, or who are completely priced out of even the cheapest new cars, the only option is the used lot.
Yeah.
And that secondary market has become wildly chaotic.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because calling it chaotic might be an understatement. Looking at a recent analysis of dealership demand, the market is violently bifurcating. If you aren't buying new, you are walking into a secondary market that has been completely warped by all this affordability pressure at the top.
The widening chasm between new and used is staggering. According to that dealership demand analysis, the price gap between a new and used car has just exploded. Just a few years ago, that gap was around $13,000.
Wow.
It has ballooned to $21,000.
Let's put that in terms of a monthly budget, because that is how people actually buy cars. That massive price gap means new vehicle payments are roughly $180 higher every single month than used payments.
Which is huge.
It is. For a massive chunk of the country, $180 is the entire weekly grocery budget. It's utility bills. It is not pocket change. So they have absolutely no choice but to look for older, higher mileage vehicles.
And the ripple effect on the lot is immediate. Because of that payment gap, 7 to 10-year-old vehicles now make up nearly a quarter of all used sales.
Wait, really? A quarter?
Yes. Think about that. A quarter of the market is buying cars pushing a decade old. Wow. Furthermore, because these buyers are hypersensitive to operating costs, used hybrid demand is surging. Dealerships are seeing certain used hybrid models experience triple-digit percentage growth in sales.
I have to stop you there, because here is where the reality of the lot gets genuinely shocking. You would think a 10-year-old high-mileage vehicle would be dirt cheap, a bargain.
You'd think so, yeah.
But the demand for them is so intense that the prices are completely detached from reality.
They really are. That same analysis of dealership demand reveals that even high-mileage workhorses, like a Ford F-150 or a Ram 1500, are averaging around $20,000, with more than 120,000 miles on the odometer.
$20,000 for a truck that has already driven halfway to the moon? That is incredible. And what worries me is that there are massive geopolitical forces squeezing the bottom of this market even harder.
Oh, absolutely.
The analysis notes that import duties, specifically the massive $13,200 average tariffs on Chinese vehicles, threaten to make affordable new cars even scarcer.
It essentially walls off the relief valve. Dealerships are operating two completely different business models on the exact same lot.
Yeah.
On one side of the showroom, you have a luxury boutique catering to wealthy buyers who can easily absorb a $50,000 sticker price for a new SUV.
And on the other side,
out on the back lot, you have a high-mileage survival business for everyone else, where buyers are fiercely competing over exhausted pickup trucks and 10-year-old hybrids.
But what that analysis doesn't answer is how rising import duties will permanently alter the supply of entry-level vehicles. If cheap foreign cars can't get past those tariffs to enter the market and relieve the pressure at the bottom, I don't see how those high-mileage trucks don't just keep getting more and more expensive.
They probably will.
Which brings up the most terrifying question of all. Where is the capital coming from? Whether you are buying a downshifted subcompact or financing a $20,000 truck with 100,000 miles on it, the money has to come from somewhere.
We have to look at the lending landscape to understand how this house of cards is staying upright. A report tracking market pulse on credit and sales from Cox Automotive shows that easier credit is heavily masking the true severity of this affordability crisis.
I was looking at that Cox data, and it is full of flashing red warning signs. Yes, auto credit availability actually improved. Overall approval rates climbed, meaning lenders are actively opening the spigots to keep the metal moving off the lots.
Right, they want to keep selling cars.
But the foundational health of those loans is rotting. Down payments are lower than they used to be, negative equity is higher, and lower-income consumers are relying heavily on this credit just to stay afloat amid broader inflation.
The core mechanism of how people are affording these cars is incredibly dangerous. They're basically manipulating the amortization schedule.
And the numbers back that up in a terrifying way. The Cox report warns that loans stretching past 72 months just hit a record 31.1% share of the market.
It's wild.
Nearly a third of all buyers are taking out loans that last 6, 7, or even 8 years.
Let's break down why that is so toxic. When you stretch a loan to 84 months, the front end of your payment schedule is heavily weighted toward interest. You are barely touching the principal.
Because the bank wants their money first.
Exactly. Meanwhile, a car is a depreciating asset. It loses a huge chunk of its value the second you drive it off the lot. So by year 3 of an 84-month loan, you might still owe $35,000 on a car that the open market says is only worth $22,000.
Yeah.
You are entirely trapped in negative equity.
It feels like an incredible gamble. Consumers are trading their long-term financial health for a manageable monthly payment right now. But what this credit report doesn't tell us is where the breaking point is for mass consumer defaults if interest rates stay high.
That exact fear is completely upending the front lines of the automotive business. The dealership finance and insurance office. There's a fascinating dealership operations piece focused on extended ownership that points out how this loan stretching is forcing F&I departments to completely redesign their entire pitch.
Because the old menus were built for an era that doesn't exist anymore. You used to buy the car, grab a basic 3-year extended warranty, and right as it expired, you came back and traded the car in for a new one.
Precisely. But now, that manager has to take a highly consultative approach. They have to sit down and ask buyers very uncomfortable questions. Like, how long are you actually going to keep this car? How would a $4,000 transmission replacement impact your household budget in year 6 of this loan?
Right.
Because of all that negative equity we just discussed, GAP insurance, which covers the difference between what the car is worth and what you owe if it's totaled, is no longer just an upsell. It is absolutely vital protection.
The operations piece outlines a nightmare scenario that genuinely made me sweat. Imagine a buyer with an 84-month loan, but they only purchase a 60-month service contract.
Oh, man.
Yeah. They are left entirely exposed for 2 full years of payments while potentially footing massive repair bills out of pocket. You could still owe $400 a month on a car that is sitting dead in a repair shop with a blown engine.
It fundamentally changes what the dealership is selling. They can no longer just push standard add-ons like window tint or tire protection. They are essentially acting as risk managers, selling long-term financial disaster insurance.
So what does this all mean? Are we basically financing cars the way we used to finance houses? Because making a 7-year financial commitment on a depreciating piece of machinery that sits out in the snow just feels fundamentally reckless.
It's very risky.
And what this doesn't address is how F&I managers can convince cash-strapped buyers to add more coverage to an already massive monthly payment. The psychological hurdle must be massive.
It is an incredibly difficult needle to thread. The buyer is maxed out, but the risk of leaving them unprotected is just too high for everyone involved.
So we have this brutal environment in the gas-powered market, consumers downshifting, fighting over high-mileage used trucks, and stretching loans to the breaking point.
Yep.
But there is one major segment of the market that seems to be operating in an alternate reality.
The electric vehicle market. It is defying almost all of these traditional pricing trends, but for very complicated and honestly largely artificial reasons.
If we pull up that Kelley Blue Book data again and isolate the EV-specific numbers, it is a completely different story. EV prices are actually dropping. They fell 4.5%. Even Tesla's average transaction price fell.
Right.
But the glaring catch is that automakers are having to deploy massive incentives just to move the metal.
The contrast in the boardroom strategy is jarring.
Yeah.
We noted earlier that for the broader industry, automakers are holding the line, keeping general incentives tight at around 7%. But for EVs, they are leaning incredibly heavily on discounts.
Looking back at that pricing data, it highlights that EV incentives are nearly double the industry average, sitting at 13%. Automakers are practically throwing cash at buyers to clear out EV inventory before it stagnates on the lots.
And the financial engineering doesn't stop with the manufacturers. The government is stepping in heavily to artificially sweeten the deal. There is a policy brief out of California that details how states are aggressively intervening in the EV market for first-time buyers, specifically to replace the momentum that was lost when certain federal credits expired.
California's program is massive. They're offering a $3,500 point-of-sale discount for first-time buyers on new EVs under $50,000. And they are subsidizing the used market, too, offering a $1,750 discount for used EVs under $25,000.
The mechanism they chose is what makes this so impactful. The policy brief details how California is entirely bypassing the headache of mail-in rebates or end-of-year tax credits. By making this a point-of-sale discount, the money is applied right at the cash register at the dealership.
The psychological advantage of that is huge.
It's not just psychological, it's mathematical. A point-of-sale discount lowers the capitalized cost of the vehicle on day one. That means the buyer is financing a smaller amount, paying less sales tax, and paying less interest over the life of the loan. It directly attacks the monthly payment hurdle we've been discussing.
And the sheer volume of cash being injected is staggering. The state allocated $135.5 million, and participating automakers are expected to match it, creating a total incentive pool of roughly $270 million.
That's a lot of money.
It is. I also noticed a fascinating carve-out in the policy. They specifically exempt California-based automakers like Rivian and Lucid from that $50,000 price cap.
Which raises serious questions about the organic viability of the EV market at this current stage. The implication is undeniable. This technology isn't standing on its own 2 feet yet. It is heavily reliant on a combination of massive manufacturer discounts to clear overstock and incredibly aggressive state interventions to artificially lower the barrier to entry.
But I look at that $270 million pool, and what the policy outline doesn't answer is whether that pool will actually bring in new lower-income buyers or just subsidize people who are going to buy an EV anyway.
That is the eternal risk with demand-side subsidies.
Yeah.
They often reward behavior that was going to happen regardless.
So if we step back and look at this entire landscape, from the luxury showrooms to the high-mileage lots to the EV chargers, so now we've got a pattern.
We do. 3 incredibly distinct themes emerge from all of this data. First, there is a massive, relentless flight to affordability.
And absolutely. We see it plainly in the KBB pricing data, where consumers are tactically downshifting into subcompacts to dodge high sticker prices. And that is perfectly mirrored in the dealership demand data, showing the massive surge in buyers fighting over 7 to 10-year-old used cars. Consumers are hunting for value wherever they can possibly find it.
The second theme is the dangerous financing stretch, supported directly by the Cox credit data, highlighting the sheer volume of loans stretching past 72 months. That is creating a ticking time bomb of negative equity across the middle class.
Right.
And as we saw in the dealership operations piece, it is forcing F&I offices to rethink their entire existence, pushing long-term GAP insurance just to protect consumers from the reality of their own extended loan terms.
And the third theme is the entirely artificial nature of the EV market right now. You have the KBB data showing those bloated 13% manufacturer incentives paired directly with the California policy brief outlining hundreds of millions of dollars in point-of-sale discounts, all working overtime just to keep EV sales momentum from stalling out.
And within those themes, we are seeing some incredible contradictions in how the industry is operating. Look at the immense tension in the automaker pricing strategies.
Totally disconnected.
Yeah, you have boardrooms fiercely holding the line on general vehicle incentives, keeping them tight at around 7% to maximize profit on gas cars, while simultaneously giving away the farm on EVs at 13% just to prevent inventory from rotting on the lot.
It is a total split personality, and the tension between public policy and consumer reality is just as stark. You have policymakers in places like California aggressively pushing for new EV adoption with these massive, heavily funded discount programs.
Right.
But when you look at the dealership demand, everyday consumers who are actually feeling the pinch of inflation are overwhelmingly fleeing toward older, used gas hybrids just to save $50 a month on their commute.
It perfectly highlights the vast disconnect between top-down environmental policy goals and the brutal bottom-up economic reality for the average household.
Which really brings us to the ultimate practical takeaway for you, the listener. The monthly payment is the undisputed king of the car market in the current landscape. It is the single solitary metric that matters. It is overriding brand loyalty, it is overriding segment preference, and in the case of those 84-month loans, it is completely overriding long-term financial common sense. People aren't shopping for a car anymore. They are shopping for a payment they can survive.
And that sobering reality leaves us with a lingering, provocative thought to consider moving forward. If the affordability crisis dictates that 84-month loans, a full 7 years of payments, become the permanent, inescapable standard for the middle class, How will that ultimately alter the fundamental design and engineering of the vehicles themselves?
Oh, wow. That's a great question.
Automakers will eventually have to build cars knowing they absolutely must survive a decade of hard use before the original owner can ever afford to build equity, trade them in, and buy again.
That is a wild thought. We might be heading toward an era of over-engineered 10-year survival vehicles just to match the terms of the bank loans. Thanks for joining us for this segment of Auto News Talk. Keep an eye on those financing terms the next time you step onto a lot and ask yourself if you're buying a car or if you are just buying a monthly payment.